I'd been at Black Ridge Systems for just over 5 years. I started back when it was a scrappy 50-man shop inside an old dental office. Back then, I was the guy they called when the servers hiccuped or the compliance system flagged weird behavior. Not glamorous, but I kept the lights on. Over time, growth brought suits, brought structure, brought Tristan, the new blood VP, who called himself a disruptor and made PowerPoint slides with emojis. He called my reporting suite a cute little spreadsheet fortress. That was my first red flag. I didn't build it to be cute. I built it to stop this company from getting spanked by federal auditors after the old COO flubbed a $14 million invoice. So, yeah, I took that personal. I kept patching holes, running audits, and eating sad burritos in the server room while the new guard made coffee on TikTok. But I started planning too. Not revenge exactly, just insurance. I called it the invisible exit. Not for them, for me. Tristan strutted in on his first day like he was shooting a promo for a business podcast. Loafers, no socks, indoor sunglasses. Tristan didn't get it, not even a little bit. He wanted to gut legacy systems, which meant my stack. Didn't understand a lick of it, but since it didn't look like a drag and drop app, he wanted it gone. He thought our dashboards were the system. Never touched the actual back end. Never used an admin key. Didn't even have one. I'd caught him standing in front of the servers once, talking about leveraging cloud-based solutions like it was some magic wand. He had no clue what he was talking about. That's when it hit me. He wasn't here to make things better. He was here to tear it all down. He didn't care about the systems that kept the company running. He wanted his new world, his shiny tech, his buzzwords. And I was just in the way. I realized then he was planning to cut me loose. Not today, but soon. It was the same playbook every time. Old guy, out of touch, shoved aside for the future. He'd smile, give me some lame, thank you for your contributions. And that would be it. I'd be history. So I did what I always do when things start to crumble. I started planning. I tweaked a few things, just enough to make sure I had some leverage when the axe fell. First, I added a line to the admin access document. Dual admin override required, per protocol. Sounds simple enough, right? Just a little tweak to the policy. But when I filed it with legal, it was golden, rubber stamped. I knew nobody would read it. Legal didn't care. They never did. They just needed to make sure it looked good for the auditors. And I knew they'd use my template without even blinking. I wasn't going to give Tristan the satisfaction of thinking he could just erase me, like I was a file on a desktop that could be thrown away. I was a lot more complicated than that. My stack, the one he called cute, had been my baby, my life raft when things got rough. I'd spent years building it, fine-tuning it, fixing it when the whole company started shaking. But now, I needed something else. I needed to make sure that if they tried to screw me, they'd have to work for it. I was tired of being invisible. I made the changes slowly, methodically. There was no rush. I added a few more lines of code, strengthened the encryption on admin logs, deleted. It took a few days to code, but in the end, I knew it was worth it. Because when they came for me, they'd have to deal with all of it. The legacy stack, the dashboards, the backups, and when the dust settled, they'd see me, even if they couldn't see me. It happened on a Tuesday. Tristan was leading the all-hands. Started with a slide that said, restructuring for velocity. Big words, small brain. The whole room was half listening, half pretending to care. People had learned to tune him out by then. Then came the announcement. My role was being sunsetted. I couldn't even make that up if I tried. He actually used the word, sunsetted, like I was some outdated app they were deactivating. He said something about flexibility and evolution. You know the speech, corporate fluff. Pushed the idea that the company was growing and changing, and I just didn't fit anymore. Then he called me buddy and thanked me for my contributions. Not even appreciation, contributions. Like I was some expendable volunteer, not the guy who built half of what kept this place alive. I didn't say much, just nodded. Didn't want to give him the satisfaction of any reaction. I wasn't going to argue with him or try to explain why he was wrong. He didn't care. He never cared. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my badge, and laid it on the table in front of him, like it was the only thing worth saying. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even hard. It just felt like the right thing to do. A quiet statement. I dropped it, and the room fell silent for a second, like everyone knew something had just shifted. Legal didn't flinch. They'd been ready for this, I could tell. They handed me a cartoon-colored pamphlet about career transitions, like that was going to make this easier. But what they didn't realize, the second that badge hit the table, the trigger I'd set up months ago went off. Admin credentials revoked. Override disabled. Access pending dual auth approval. That was it. The system locked me out. It was like I'd just hit a switch in the background, but I knew it was only a matter of time before they realized what had happened. I stood up, slid my chair back, and walked out without looking back. No one said anything. No one stopped me, just like I knew they wouldn't. I grabbed my jacket from the back of my chair, slung it over my shoulder, and picked up my thermos. That's all I had left. That, and the satisfaction of knowing exactly what was coming next. As I passed Tristan in the hallway, he didn't even look up, didn't even notice me. Fine, that was fine. He was too busy patting himself on the back for being the disruptor, the guy who came in and shook things up. He'd feel it soon enough. I stepped outside into the parking lot. The air was cold, but it didn't matter. I wasn't going back. They could have their shiny new systems and their agility pods. They just didn't realize how fragile they were, how dependent they'd become on what I built. They would soon enough. Friday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Gavin, one of the junior analysts. He was still trying to play catch-up after the mess I left behind. "Hey man, do you remember the backup login for the audit portal?" I didn't answer. I wasn't surprised. Word had gotten out. It didn't take long for them to realize something was off, especially with the feds breathing down their necks. They tried running a test audit, simple stuff, to see if everything was still functional. The dashboard lit up, but when they tried to dig deeper, the core system asked for credential 2, and that's when the panic started. Gavin, poor kid. He hit Confluence, searching through old documentation I wrote 3 years back. He didn't stand a chance. He was digging through pages of notes I'd written when no one cared to read them, trying to find something useful. But the truth was I'd buried all the key information so deep that no intern would ever dig it out. They tried rerouting through a dummy shell Gavin built, but that didn't go over well. The system flagged it as a breach attempt and locked access for 15 minutes. That was when the storm hit. I could almost hear Tristan's voice over the phone, panicked but trying to sound calm, like he was some kind of expert in a crisis. "Reset the password," he said, like it was that simple. Gavin swallowed hard and muttered, "You can't. It's dual auth now." There was silence. Then the real questions started. Who's the second admin? No one knew, not a single soul. Legal scrambled to get the right people on the line. HR pulled up the old designation form, and that's when it all came to light. There it was, right on the form. Leonard S. Dufree, facilities, morning shift. Clocked out by 7:15. The guy who cleaned the restrooms, who whistled Journey songs while mopping the floors. An awkward silence hung in the air. One of the auditors, an older woman with a hawk-like stare, smirked. "That," she said, nodding to the form, "is a first." I couldn't help it. I felt a little burst of satisfaction. This was going exactly how I'd planned it. They thought they could run over me, erase me, make me invisible, but I was still here, in a way they never saw coming. Leonard, the janitor, was the key. Tristan was probably standing there, looking like he'd swallowed a rock. I imagined him pacing, trying to come up with some slick way to spin this, but he couldn't. There was no way to explain away a retired Navy guy with a Walkman being the backup admin for a multi-million-dollar compliance system. No PowerPoint could save him now. They spent the next hour scrambling. Legal was on the phone, HR was running around, and everyone else in the room was pretending to be busy. The auditors, however, didn't hide their amusement. They'd seen it all before, but never like this. I sat back in my chair, hands folded behind my head, smiling to myself. They were playing catch-up, but the game was already over. Monday, 8:07 a.m. The doors to the conference room swung open. 3 federal auditors walked in, crisp blazers, clipboards in hand, no smiles. They didn't need to be friendly. They were there for a reason, and that reason was us. Tristan straightened up, trying to pull off the whole big shot vibe as he met them in the doorway. "Welcome to Black Ridge, where innovation meets accountability," he said, throwing in a forced grin like he was delivering a punchline. The lead auditor didn't crack, just nodded. "We'll need full audit access," she said, voice sharp, clear. Gavin, poor kid, logged in like he'd done 1,000 times before. But this time, the system didn't play nice. It asked for co-admin credentials. Gavin froze, a beat too long. He muttered, I can't. Tristan stepped in, trying to act like he was in control. "We let Karen go." The lead auditor didn't even blink. And the co-admin? Silence. Gavin shifted, looking back and forth between the auditors and the screen. I think it's Leonard." Tristan's face twitched. HR, like they always do when the walls start closing in, stepped in to confirm. "Yes, that's correct. Leonard S. Dupree, custodian, part-time, retired Navy." The auditors exchanged glances. The lead auditor leaned in, her eyes narrowing. "Does Leonard know how to operate the system?" Gavin, clearly rattled, half laughed. "He mops." I could hear the sound of that statement bouncing around the room. The whole ops team behind the glass was pretending not to watch, but I knew they were all listening. Eyes were glued to the scene unfolding, and honestly, I was kind of enjoying it. Someone on the team tried calling Leonard. Tristan's face was bloodless, his expression frozen like a deer caught in headlights. He looked like a man who just figured out the Titanic was sinking, and that he was the one who drilled the hole. I leaned back in my chair, watching it all unfold. He didn't know how deep the hole went. He didn't know what I had set in motion when I pulled that trigger. And now, here he was, completely exposed. The lead auditor leaned forward again. But this time, there was no amusement in her voice. Just business. "We'll need to suspend this audit until you can get the co-admin credentials." Tristan opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. His face was flush, his eyes darting around, desperate for a solution that wasn't there. I could almost hear the wheels in his head spinning. He was realizing too late that this wasn't just some glitch. It wasn't a small hiccup in the system. This was the hole in the ship, and the water was rising fast. I could feel the tension in the room thickening. The auditors didn't give a damn about his excuses. They had their own deadlines, their own protocols. They didn't care about Tristan's PowerPoint presentations or his disruptive culture. One of the auditors made a note on his clipboard, barely looking at Tristan. "We'll be in touch, but I suggest you get this fixed. Soon." As the auditors filed out, their footsteps echoing down the hallway, I could practically taste the tension in the air. Tristan's hands were trembling, his jaw clenched tight. He looked at his team, looking for someone, anyone, to make it right. But he couldn't fix this. Not without Leonard. I stood up, stretching like I had all the time in the world. As I walked toward the door, I could see Tristan's eyes follow me. He opened his mouth to say something, but I wasn't sticking around for the inevitable begging. I knew how this game worked. He'd try to spin it, make some calls, beg legal to come up with a workaround. But it was already over. The system was locked down. Leonard was the key, and Leonard wasn't answering. I walked out without looking back, but I could feel the heat of it on my neck, the building pressure, the ticking clock. It was just a matter of time before the rest of the house of cards came tumbling down. And I wasn't going to be there to watch it happen. By lunch, the vendor dashboards failed to sync. Joint projects came to a screeching halt. Compliance flags went out, one after another, like alarms in a firehouse. Everyone was scrambling, trying to figure out what the hell was happening, but no one knew. The system was locked up tight, and they couldn't do a damn thing about it. "Legal," called the founder. I could picture that call. Frantic, urgent, the kind of phone call no one wants to make. By dinner, the founder was on a plane, headed to the office like a knight on horseback, ready to save the day. But it was already too late. They couldn't fix what was broken. The next morning, Tuesday, the federal notice came through. Pending decertification for non-compliance. I read it over a cup of coffee in my kitchen, still in my sweats. The words sank in slow, but they hit hard. No federal clearance meant no federal contracts. No contracts meant no IPO. The whole thing was crumbling, just like I'd planned. They tried to find me. Legal sent emails, then fumbled with backup numbers. LinkedIn was the easiest to track, but all they found was a clean sharp, available for short-term recovery roles. No address, no contact. HR made their move first. They offered me a return bonus, a carrot to dangle, but I wasn't interested. Legal, of course, jumped in next, drafting a new contract, probably with the same tired terms they thought would make everything go away. They were too late. Tristan wrote a groveling apology, but I didn't bother opening it. I could imagine the words he used. I was wrong. I underestimated you. We value your expertise. But it wasn't the apology I wanted. It was the one I never needed, and I wasn't about to waste any more time on them. I ignored it all. I was done. They could spin their wheels all they wanted, but without me, they were just a house of cards, held up by a stack of flimsy promises and bad decisions. They hadn't seen it coming, not the way I had. The texts, the calls, they all faded into the background noise. There was nothing left to say. The final audit report came in during a board meeting. I could almost hear the murmur of tension, the weight of every eye on the founder, as legal read it out loud, slowly, like it was a death sentence. Cause of failure, unauthorized termination of credentialed administrator, system access, unverified. Chain of custody, broken. Tristan shifted in his chair, trying to maintain some semblance of control, but you could tell the wheels were spinning too fast in his head. He wasn't ready for this. It's not what it looks like, he said, his voice shaky but trying to sound authoritative. The door opened and the lead auditor walked in. She was holding a thick folder, the final nail in the coffin. She didn't even look at Tristan, just walked straight to the table and waved the report at the board. You gave her the keys. She followed protocol. You didn't, she said, like it was the simplest thing in the world. The room went still. When they asked for the name of the co-admin, the government had redacted it. Too embarrassing to be public. The silence in the room was like a tightrope, and I could practically feel the founder's pulse racing. The CFO blinked, looking from the report to the team. Wait, they redacted the janitor's name? Legal nodded, almost too smoothly. To preserve vendor dignity, Tristan's face went white, like he had just been told his entire life had been a lie. The realization hit him all at once. This wasn't some little screw-up. This was the wrecking ball. Someone in the back of the room whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear, "She warned us." It was the moment I'd been waiting for. The point where the people who'd overlooked me, who thought I was just the old guy who didn't get it, finally realized they'd been played. They never saw it coming. Not the way I had. The press release dropped a few hours later. Federal contract suspended pending internal remediation. VP of Ops resigns effective immediately. I wasn't around to see it unfold, but I didn't need to be. I was in my kitchen, drinking tea, watching the headline scroll across my screen. It felt almost anticlimactic. They never saw me coming because they never bothered to look.